Smoke billowed from the two-story home as flames engulfed the structure. The family quickly moved from the place to get free from the flames and imminent danger. As the family gathered on the front lawn, catching their breath, hoping that everyone was there, they noticed that one family member was missing, the 6-year-old little boy, the son. The father immediately tried to run back into the house, but quickly realized that it was going to be impossible. And that's when he heard his son's voice, screaming from the upstairs window, "Help! Help me!" The father ran to the window and yelled to his son, "Jump! Jump!" And the son said, I can't see you." The father continued to encourage his son to get out as best as he could, to jump from the window. And the son just kept saying, "I can't jump, I can't see you." But the father then realized what his son needed to hear. He said, "Son, jump, I can see you." And immediately the son flung himself from the window, and his father caught him and got him to safety. My friends, the reason I tell you this story is because we are engulfed in smoke that makes it hard for us to see. When we're in the midst of that kind of environment, peace is hard to come by. As we continue with this first week of Advent, we reflect and think about the power of peace. And in this opening story, we realize that God can see us, and he wishes that we jump. We jump into life, into love, into grace, into peace. When we can't see it, God moves. There's a great story told in the Gospel of Mark, chapter 4, where Jesus and his disciples are out on the Sea of Galilee. This is a place that many of his disciples had known really well. They were fishermen, and they were often out on the lake doing their job. After being invited to walk with Jesus in discipleship, they went back out to the sea with Jesus, and they came across a storm. This time we realize and know in Mark 4 that it was a horrible storm. Storms they'd probably seen before, but this time they were anxious. They were nervous. They were afraid. And in the midst of this storm, Jesus' posture, Jesus' method was interesting. Mark tells us in verse 38 that Jesus was asleep on a cushion. Asleep. But not just randomly dozing off like you and I might in the afternoon watching a football game. But Jesus was asleep on a cushion. He had purpose. He was intentionally resting in the middle of the storm. This is remarkable. This is amazing, because you and I have difficulty resting in the midst of the storm. But Jesus doesn't. And Peter's reply to Jesus was also remarkable. Peter is afraid. Peter yells and screams and says, "Jesus, wake up, there's a storm." But Peter continues and says, don't you care that we're going to die? And Jesus doesn't grace Peter with an answer. He simply stands up, awakes from his slumber, speaks to the storm, and says, "Silent, be still." But it's almost as if Jesus was not just talking to the storm, but was talking to his disciples, was talking to you and to me. And what we need to learn in this first week of Advent is to be quiet, to be still, to not listen to the storm, but listen to Jesus. In Proverbs chapter 25, verse 38, it says, "A city with broken down walls is the same as a person that lacks self-control." Another way of saying this might be that a city that is not protected is the same as a man or a woman who is anxious all the time, who stands in opposition to what God desires and longs for us. When I first became a full-time pastor, my first district superintendent used to ask us and tell us that we needed to be a non-anxious presence. That in the midst of our congregations, in the midst of our life, we were going to find people and situations that were very high stress and high difficulty. But in those moments, it was important for us to be a non-anxious presence. This idea came originally from a theologian by the name of Henry Nouwen, who was often fond of telling us as pastors and leaders in churches that we were the wounded healers, ones who carried our own burdens and own difficulties, but it was important for us to model what it looks like to be wounded, but also in the process of healing in the arms of Christ. My friends, I admit that this has been a difficult process through this time of year, of going through my own personal pain and tragedy and difficulty, but also understanding my own limitations, pushing through, but also trying to maintain my own faith and courage and peace in the midst of strife. And so, today, we lean on Jesus, who sees us, who knows us. In Exodus chapter 14, it says to us, "The Lord will fight for you if you remain still." This was in the midst of the Exodus story where Moses was leading his people out of captivity into the promised land. And they were running literally away from Pharaoh, from the very ones who would want to hurt them and kill them. But in this passage, it reminds them to be still, to hang on. The Lord will fight for you. This is one important aspect of peace, that the Lord will fight for you. I'm going to conclude this devotion by telling you about one final biblical story. It comes in Judges chapter 6. And in Judges chapter 6, we meet a biblical character by the name of Gideon. You probably know much of his story, but in this particular portion of the story, Gideon has just won a great and mighty battle. And in the midst of that, he constructs an altar in chapter 6 of Judges. And as he builds this altar, it's a way for him to honor and remember what God has done for him. As he builds this altar, he also wants it to be a symbol to the rest of the world that God has done something great and grand. But as he builds this altar, as is done often in Scripture, he gives it a name. And the name of the altar is "The Lord is Peace." Friends, as we reflect this first week of Advent, I hope that we will know with Gideon that the Lord is peace. But not only know this truth, but also to construct our own altars, our own reminders throughout the year that we can look at and realize that God has brought us through, and that God will continue to help us to be a non-anxious presence in the midst of pain, trial, and difficulty. Maybe your altar is this candle, this wreath, this devotion. Whatever it might be, set yourself a reminder of God being your peace now and always. God bless you, and have a great day.